Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here to speak to you on how Ontario is helping local communities provide critical services people rely on and keep Ontarians safe. I'd like to thank Parliamentary Secretary Adam Vaughan, Mayor John Tory, and President of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, Mayor Graydon Smith, for joining me for this very important announcement. It's been a tough year for municipalities and everyone in Ontario. We know some municipalities have been hit harder than others during the pandemic, and we want to ensure that our government is providing the necessary help for communities across the province to deal with the financial pressures related to COVID-19. That's why today we are announcing the second phase of the Safe Restart funding to Ontario's 444 municipalities so that they can meet the needs of their operating pressures experienced this year as we prepare for budgets for next year. The allocation is part of the $4 billion in emergency funding for Ontario municipalities that Premier Ford negotiated this past summer as part of the Safe Restart Agreement with the federal government. This summer, $695 million of that emergency funding flowed to every municipality in Ontario to provide immediate assistance and help them address operating pressures and shortfalls that they were experiencing because of COVID-19. But we knew that the first round wouldn't be enough for every municipality, especially those that were hit hardest by the pandemic. Today, I'm proud to announce that we are helping to ensure that every single municipality in Ontario is entering 2021 without an operating deficit from 2020. We are allocating an additional $396 million to the 48 municipalities that have been hit hardest by COVID-19 and who have demonstrated a need for additional assistance to cover those 2020 operating pressures. These communities are in the hard-hit areas like Toronto, Brampton, Mississauga, and Ottawa. We're also allocating an additional $299 million in funding across all 444 municipalities to help provide more financial relief. This additional funding will provide municipalities with more certainty as they plan their 2021 budgets to reflect the reality of COVID-19 in their communities and allow them to start 2021 in a better financial position. And it helps ensure that municipal capital projects move ahead, stay on track, and continue to drive economic growth. We know that for many people, public transit is an essential means of transportation, and transit operators across Ontario have done an incredible job during the outbreak. To further support transit across Ontario, our government is notionally allocating $1.3 billion across 108 municipalities with transit systems. This funding will ensure that municipal transit remains a safe transportation option for people across our province, so that people who need to get around, including our frontline workers, have safe and reliable transit service. Earlier this week, our government announced an additional $120 million as part of our $510 million Social Services Relief Fund to help municipalities and our Indigenous community partners keep vulnerable Ontarians safe during COVID-19. This discretionary funding can be used to improve the delivery of critical services, create longer-term housing solutions, and support plans to prepare for potential future outbreaks. From the onset of COVID-19, we have stood shoulder to shoulder with our municipal partners and throughout the pandemic, and we will continue to do so. We've made extraordinary investments in our communities across the province to help them recover from this pandemic, which is why our government has made the additional 3-year, $45 billion commitment to help communities recover as part of Ontario's action plan, Protect, Support, and Recover. Our action plan directly invests in infrastructures municipalities need, including hospitals, highways, municipal infrastructure, and broadband. The budget also includes property tax and assessment measures to help municipalities, businesses, and people in communities right across this province. Folks, municipalities have risen to the challenge during this extraordinary time to keep people safe. We will continue to work with our municipal partners and work with the federal government to leave no community behind as we continue to support the recovery. because we know that strong communities are the foundation of a strong Ontario. Their success is Ontario's success. Thank you. And now I'd like to call on my good friend, Parliamentary Secretary Adam Vaughan, for some comments.
Well, thank you very much, Minister Clark, and to my friends in the municipal sector, the mayors. The Government of Canada knows that without strong cities and municipalities, there will be no strong recovery. In fact, without strong cities, our fight to end this pandemic just isn't possible. But we also know that cities and their economies and their people have borne the brunt of the pandemic, especially in some of the parts of the city that I come from, in Toronto, in the north parts of Etobicoke and parts of Scarborough. But cities have four pillars that really require all orders of government to work together to strengthen. Public health, of course, in terms of tracking and taking measures to keep people safe. Transit, childcare and early learning to make sure our school systems and our young people are taken care of so families can work. And of course, the issue that is central to this pandemic, which is housing. You can't isolate if you don't have a safe place for shelter, and you can't distance. And so the federal government invested close to $19 billion in June in a two-phased approach to making sure that we had support for provinces as they started to manage the second wave of this pandemic. And that money was staged in such a way that we made sure that cities were directly supported by the federal government in partnership with the provinces, including Ontario, of course. Those dollars are critical to making sure that we get through this winter and get through this final stage of the pandemic, hopefully, as the vaccines start to arrive. But it involves all orders of government partnering to make sure the most vulnerable people in our communities, whether they're rural communities, big cities, whether they're remote communities, whether they're tourist locations, or whether they're resource communities, they all have requirements as the economy is transformed by the pandemic, and they all have to make sure that they have their budgets made whole. We know that in Ontario, and as a former city councillor, we know that cities have to balance their budget. And a quick walk down Queen Street or along Bloor Street will show you that many small businesses are struggling right now. And if cities don't have the support they need from provincial and federal governments, what COVID hasn't claimed, a rapid tax increase because of budget shortfalls will. So it is critical that all orders of government get together and partner around these four pillars, but also around the understanding that cities are on the front lines of this fight to end the pandemic, on the front line to make sure vulnerable populations are supported, and on the front lines of making sure we have a strong recovery. So on behalf of the Government of Canada and Minister Hussain, who I'm the Parliamentary Secretary to, on behalf of Minister Freeland as well, we're very proud to have made these transfers of dollars through provinces to cities in partnership with the Province of Ontario to make sure our cities, our municipal sector, not only survive the pandemic, but in fact lead us out of the pandemic with a strong recovery program. So transit, housing, public health, childcare are four critical priorities, and in this particular province, it's a partnership of all orders of government that get those services delivered to people who need those supports in order to contribute to our communities. And so I'd like to thank the province for stepping up, for stepping into this space, for partnering with us, but most importantly, I'd like to thank the municipal sector for keeping us all safe, keeping literally the lights on, the water running, and us well sheltered through this challenging winter. And for folks at home, the mask, the washing of hands, social distancing, and a respectful Christmas where we can show our love without necessarily having to hug everybody is the order of the day. And I'll just say one final thing before I hand it off to Mayor Tory. I was coming in listening to the radio and listening to a story of an elderly gentleman in Mississauga who, for the first time in his life at the age of 89, had reached out to a food bank. He grew up at a time when social welfare and these sorts of services just weren't available to people in this province. We've come a long way since then, but there are neighbours and members of our community who need your support. And if you can, please, cities can do a lot, provinces can do a lot, the federal government can do a lot, but there's nothing as good as checking in on a neighbour, making sure they have food to eat, the blankets are secure at night, and the heat is on, and that they aren't lonely during Christmas. So please, as we help cities and as we help provinces, please help your neighbours. Thank you. And Mayor Tory.
Well, Adam and Minister, thank you very much and good morning. And I want to thank Minister Clark and Adam Vaughan, representing the Government of Canada, for this announcement today. This is proof positive of what can happen when governments work together, which is what I think the people expect of us, because you all are the same people that elect all of us, and you're all the people that pay tax dollars to the different governments, and you expect us to work together, and today is proof positive of the good that can come from that sort of thing. I want to say that from the standpoint of Canada's largest city, Ontario's largest city, the City of Toronto, that this is good news, but it's also good news for all cities and towns, all municipalities right across the province. And you'll hear from the President of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario in that regard. But we have worked well together as governments, and this funding, as the Minister said, will confirm in the case of the City of Toronto that we will be able to continue, most importantly, with vital services, but we'll be able to do so without incurring a deficit, which under the law, and I welcome this law as a good thing, that we are not allowed to do. It makes the City of Toronto whole and balances our budget for 2020 and represents a good start, in fact, on addressing some of the issues we will continue to face in 2021. As, for example, we find that while transit ridership is increasing slowly, it is not going to recover to normal levels, and thus leaving us with a significant shortfall of hundreds of millions of dollars in the context of transit revenue at the same time as we're delivering the transit service to people. So the costs are there, but the revenue is not. The announcement today, in total, including the comments made by the Minister with respect to transit, means $1.205 billion for the City of Toronto, on top of the $669 million already provided in earlier transfers. And I should note again, this comes as a result of a partnership between the Government of Canada and the Government of Ontario. And this is the kind of thing that is welcome. Those governments, those orders of government working together to make sure that we, at the local level, can continue to provide services and to look after and support people because we're closest to where those people live. It really does show what can happen when we all decide we're going to help businesses and people get through a terrible crisis, the likes of which we've never seen before. When COVID-19 struck, we were faced as well with unprecedented costs that we had to incur to look after and respond and help people. We did the same work in 2020 that we're now doing in 2021, finding savings to make sure that we could say, as we had to reach out for some assistance from the other governments, that we had done what we could as a municipal government to do things more efficiently, to find opportunities to save. And in our own case, we have found about $500 million in savings, and we've done that without cutting services. And we have, in many cases, had to augment those services, in fact, as our residents indicated increased needs to us, whether it's in the areas of food security or a host of other things we've had to do. But despite these efforts, $500 million in savings found for 2020 and more to be found for 2021, we have nonetheless, as has been the case with other cities and towns across the country, we have faced a dire shortfall, and this has come from things like reduced transit revenue, reduced parking revenues, and so forth that we relied upon to keep the cities going. Toronto, for example, fell some $332 million short on transit revenue in 2020, but we still had the cost of operating almost the full system to get people where they had to go, especially our frontline workers and people who just had to go to work. We had to continue to operate a system, even though a lot of the money needed to operate it was just not there anymore. So through the Safe Restart Agreement, the federal and provincial governments both answered our call, and I thank them for that, because it would have been perhaps easy for them to say, well, we've done a number of other programs for other groups, and we're not in a position to be able to help. But I think they understood the importance that both Minister Clark and Adam Vaughan have made reference to this morning as to the role that municipalities, cities and towns play. And so I want to say thank you in particular on an individual basis to Minister Steve Clark, to Minister Caroline Mulroney, Minister Rod Phillips, the Finance Minister for Ontario, and to Premier Ford for their ongoing support of municipalities, and including in particular the City of Toronto. I can tell you from my own personal involvement in those discussions that Premier Ford never wavered in his determination to help arrive at a package to help cities, including Toronto. And he worked with the federal government and with the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, and others to make sure that that happened. And I want to thank Adam Vaughan as well. He has been someone very much involved in advocating for Toronto's and for cities across Canada when it comes to housing. But in the case of these national discussions, and Toronto in particular, Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, the Toronto caucus of members of Parliament, and Prime Minister Trudeau, again, with whom I spoke, and never wavered in his determination to support municipalities. They never wavered in their support for cities. The job we had in terms of being involved in this was just to get these two governments onto the dance floor $1 and then start the music. And I think that what people are seeing today is the very positive result that comes from that. It was an all-hands-on-deck effort that happened during an unprecedented emergency. And I want to thank as well my fellow mayors from across the country, but those from the GTA and from Ontario as well, because we all stood together and outlined what we needed, and the other governments responded. This will help us to shelter people in our city, many of those people coming from around the region. It will help us to continue to work with the province to increase access to testing in particularly hard-hit neighbourhoods so that we can get through this nightmare as quickly as possible. And it also represents some help for us in the context of 2021, because while we're still finalizing, and cities and towns are in the process of finalizing their 2021 budgets, because the new year begins for us on January the 1st, we hope that as the year progresses, we will have success with vaccines, because there is hope in that. We hope people will have a well-behaved Christmas in the context of not seeing people that you'd love to see and hug, as was mentioned, and that will help us to be in a situation where our revenues will recover on transit and other areas in the new year, so that we will have less need for assistance. But as of this moment, we will need for the other governments to come forward and be of assistance and partnership with us again to make sure that we can continue to do what we have to do, delivering the services on which people rely. So please make no mistake. Today's news is very good news for the people of the City of Toronto, and you'll hear how good news it is as well for people in cities and towns right across Ontario. But when our largest city, Toronto, is doing well and is strong and on its feet and supporting people and getting back to the task of growing our economy, then that is good for the rest of Ontario, and it is good for the rest of Canada. This is a country that is going to come back stronger than ever. This is a city and a province. These are cities, and this is a city and province that are going to come back stronger than ever because we did the right thing as governments to move quickly to help people together, and because we worked together as partners. And I think this funding announcement made today by Minister Clark and supported, of course, by Premier Ford and by Prime Minister Trudeau will help us to get back on track faster and to recover faster and to continue to support people all the while. So on that note, I would like to invite the Mayor of Bracebridge, Mayor Graydon Smith, who is also the President of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, AMO, to say a few words with respect to cities and towns across the province.
Well, good morning, everyone. And I'm Graydon Smith, President of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and delighted to be here today for this important announcement. Since March, municipal governments in every part of Ontario have been on the front line battle with COVID-19. They've been keeping communities safe, maintaining essential services, and taking steps to protect residents, organizations, and businesses that form the fabric of our communities and our local and provincial and national economies. We've been encouraged by the remarkable collaboration of all orders of government working together, responding effectively, and with common purpose. The Safe Restart Agreement funding, announced last summer, is a great example of all orders of government working together to ensure municipalities can play their essential role in the economic recovery. By offsetting the COVID-19 related costs and revenue losses of municipalities, the federal and provincial governments are investing in the future prosperity of our communities. Today's announcement of Phase 2 Safe Restart operational funding is timely and most welcome. This funding will ensure municipalities in every part of Ontario are in a better position to maintain vital services in 2021 and to proceed with capital investments essential to Ontario's economic recovery. Municipalities, large and small, in all parts of Ontario are eager to play their role in rebuilding a prosperous and productive, sustainable economy. By helping to safeguard our financial stability, Canada and Ontario are helping to support the municipal public services Ontarians rely on most, and helping to ensure that essential infrastructure investments are not delayed unnecessarily. As municipal governments finalize their 2021 budgets, the funding announced today provides an extra measure of confidence to plan for the future. It brings added stability to municipal budgets and is an important part of a concerted federal, provincial, and municipal response to COVID-19. There are still hard months ahead. The pandemic continues to impact our lives, our services, and our economy. But municipalities will continue to endure lost revenues for transit and a range of other services while this goes on. We will continue to incur significant new costs to ensure public health and safety and to address the needs of the most vulnerable in our society. So we'll continue to work with our partners in the community, the province, and the federal government. And we'll continue to invest in essential municipal services and capital projects to drive the economic recovery and create thriving communities. As we head into the holidays, I want to acknowledge and thank the thousands of municipal public servants across Ontario who have been working tirelessly for the past 10 months. It takes courage and commitment to show up during a pandemic. So many are diligently and quietly doing the work to keep people safe and keep our economy going, and we are deeply grateful. Although we must all celebrate differently this year, may you have a happy, healthy, and safe festive season. And with that, I'll turn it over and thank once again Minister Clark and all those that have been involved in bringing us this important funding for municipalities. Thank you.
We'll go to the phone line for questions. Just a reminder, it's one question, one follow-up.
Your first question comes from Jeff Gray with the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead.
Oh, hi, thanks. About the issue, I guess, now is looking to next year, and Mayor Tory and the FAO have talked about still very substantial amounts of money that will be needed next year for 2021. Is there a commitment in the offing to restructure the way municipalities are funded even beyond that, and is there money that is being set aside to help them out next year as well?
Well, Jeff, thanks for the question. Hope you're well. As a matter of fact, yesterday we had a provincial territorial ministers meeting for ministers responsible for local government, and we decided to have a continued conversation early in 2021 about the next ask of the federal government. Obviously, today is a day to celebrate tremendous cooperation between all three levels of government in our province and in our country. As well, you mentioned the FAO report. The FAO also talked about municipalities and the province working on cost savings. We've had a really good relationship with Ontario's 444 municipalities. We've put forward two programs, the Audit and Accountability Fund and the Municipal Modernization Program. Both of those programs, whether you're in a large urban municipality or a small rural or northern community, provided those line-by-line savings that we're hoping to build upon in 2021. So the conversations are ongoing with my provincial and territorial colleagues, but suffice it to say, we'll be there for municipalities moving forward. We wanted to make sure that we ended off 2020 on the right note, and to be able to put municipalities in a good position for their budgeting in 2021. So more to say in the coming weeks.
Follow-up?
And if I could just switch gears then, Minister, just to go to the question of MZOs, which keeps coming up, these special zoning orders that you have been issuing that have become controversial, resulted in resignations of the Greenbelt Council members and so on. There are some debates now happening in some places where these MZOs occurred, where local communities are saying they were not consulted, they were not involved, and now have no input into the decision. There's a glass factory in Stratford that has become controversial. Are you looking at modifying or changing any MZOs that you have issued, and or are you considering a pause or slowing down on your use of MZOs?
Well, first of all, Jeff, again, a great question. There's been a lot of conversation about the tool, which I think is a very important tool that's been able to create and fast-track 3,700 long-term care beds right here in Toronto. We've worked collaboratively with the city on 2 supportive housing projects, plus the expansion to Sunnybrook Hospital. So the tool is very important for economic development. On the glass plant in Stratford, I've made the 3 letters from the mayor public. This was asked of me to provide an MZO for this project 3 separate occasions by the mayor and council. So any MZO that we move forward on non-provincial land, we do so at the request of the local council. Now, in saying that, we have posted today for comment on the registry comments about the MZO. I understand and I hear the voices that are out there regarding the use of the tool. So we'll ask for public comment over the next 45 days, and those comments will help inform us on the path forward. So thank you for the question.
Next question.
Your next question comes from Matt Bingley with Global News. Please go ahead.
Hey, Matt.
I actually have a question for Mayor Tory. Just wondering, you've spoken a little bit about this today, about the possibility of having the provincial lockdown extended and possibly stricter restrictions put in. Can you just please tell us what you would like to actually see and what you are actually hearing from the province?
Well, we're engaged in discussions both at the political level, but also the medical officers of health are talking to one another about what we need to do to address what is a very alarming situation, acknowledged, for example, by the Hospital Association and by others, with respect to the strain on our healthcare system and some of the numbers that we're seeing that indicate that the spread of this virus is not abating in the manner that we would have liked. I will just offer you one view coming from one mayor, namely the mayor of the City of Toronto, me, and that is that I think we have to have something that is truly going to apply across the entire region, because I think people are finding it too easy to move back and forth and do things we're discouraging them from doing, and I think that's not helping us. I think that we have to look at some of the things that they've done, for example, in Quebec, with respect to saying in a period of time that will be quieter for the economy and for business generally, to say to people that we don't need you to be going to work unless you absolutely positively have to go to work as a frontline worker. I mean, it's some of those very same heroes of ours that are being put at risk by some of the behavior. But I think the most important thing of all is we've got to get the message across to people. I heard on the way over here somebody talking on the radio about them having a discussion with themselves and their family about whether they should go see their parents. And the answer to that question is actually very easy. The answer is no, as tough as it is, that you shouldn't and you can't go to see your parents or uncles or aunts or cousins or grandchildren in my own case, because that is what is going to cause an even bigger problem for us in January. And, you know, we've seen that we could set a good example for ourselves and affect the numbers positively in the winter and spring. And we've seen it from the cell phone activity, where in the spring, cell phones stayed home all day. That meant people stayed home with them, more importantly. And we've got to get back to that. And I think that's up to people making individual decisions about their own behavior, more so than it is any kinds of government rules. But I think, and we've discussed this morning, just shutting down further city programs that are still operating to send the signal that we want to give you fewer places to go so that you will stay home. It'll be a different Christmas, but only one. And then we can get back, you know, next year to a lot of activities that we've had to sacrifice. So these are the kinds of things that we're going to be discussing, and I'm certainly one who believes we should do the maximum amount that we can feasibly and properly and do with public confidence on medical advice, so that we can really use the Christmas period to try to wrestle this thing more to the ground.
Follow-up?
When would be an appropriate time for this information to be passed on to the public as way of an actual announcement?
Well, most of these decisions, some can be done locally, and I can assure you in the case of the City of Toronto that I would want us to take the best medical advice we have and do what we can do. But other decisions are provincial in nature and regional, and I think that that means there has to be these discussions carried on. But I would say this, we have a deadline for two big municipalities, Toronto and Peel, coming up next week on Monday, and I think in advance of that it's fair to give people notice of what it is you're going to do, whether that's just to lift the restrictions or whether it's to change them or increase them. So I would have said that we're coming up on that kind of timing at the end of the week. That's my own opinion, and that's something that I'll be striving to see, that we get decisions made by the end of the week and do whatever is going to be done by then, so that we can tell people and so they know what's expected of them. But most of it is expectations of them to please stay home. Please, when you go out for the absolutely essential things you have to do, like shopping, and some people do have to go to work, wear a mask, wash your hands, don't go to crowd scenes, do not entertain people other than those you live with. There's lots of people that, and those who live alone, we've made some exceptions, all of us have for that. So I think the end of the week is a time that's reasonable to expect that we would be very clear with the public on what it is that's expected of them and what we're trying to do as governments, working together.
Thank you, everyone.